Hi, everybody. It's Pastor Tom again of the 24 Today podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Some of you are joining by YouTube. Some of you are on the audio podcast. Either way works. Totally fine. And I just wanted to introduce my guest right now, Renaud Purifoy, who is an expert on anxiety, emotions, among other things. And in fact, let me just give you, he's been an author since the mid-'80s. And he is an author, a teacher, speaker, and I believe currently a professor in California.
Yeah, actually, I'm retired from that. So
retired professor, but you are, are you still doing the counseling?
I do a little bit through the church, yeah.
Okay. And but you know why I wanted to talk to Renaud today, is because the holidays are coming up, and being that he has done so much in the area of anxiety and emotions, he also has kind of specialized in talking about something I haven't heard anyone else talk about, and that is holiday anxiety. And so it's a perfect time to be speaking about this. He has different books out. One of them is Overcoming Anxiety, and you can find them on Amazon.com or his website, which is whyemotions.com. That's whyemotions.com. So let's start, Renaud, and I'll quit gabbing here at the beginning. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Renaud, I know that much of your work over the years has had to do with anxiety because it's such a common experience for us all. I know that myself, I have dealt with anxiety, in different ways for many years. I just didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to term it or even what was going on, but I certainly have dealt with it at times greater than others. But in particular, there is an anxiety that comes along around this time of year, and you have termed it holiday anxiety. Renaud, why does this time of year ramp up the anxiousness within us?
There's kind of normal holiday anxiety that's just due to the all of the demands of the holidays, and especially if you have somebody who's kind of perfectionistic and needs to do things right and has high expectations, and that just kind of ramps that all up. And then there's the clinical anxiety, the more severe type, and that's usually found in people who have a difficult background. They've had some kind of abuse issues while they grew up, parents who weren't doing it very well. And that's kind of has to do with the triggers that are unique to the Christmas time. People who grow up in difficult families, they usually get crazier around Christmas simply because there's more demands. There's all the family gatherings. Oftentimes alcohol increases the consumption of it, and those types of things. And so the family is just more difficult for the child to live in. Oftentimes, either verbal, physical, or emotional abuse increases. Even sexual abuse, if that's present. And so what happens is you get a connection between holiday music, holiday decorations, all of the things that are only there during the holiday with this increased tension in the household. And it goes back to the conditioned response that Pavlov described, where he'd put the meat powder on the tongues of the dog, he'd ring the bell, and after a while he could ring the bell and the dogs would start to salivate. Wouldn't have to have the meat powder anymore. And so a lot of human behavior is that way. Yes. In fact, post-traumatic stress disorder, a person gets into a car accident. The sights, the sounds, all the things that are associated with that car accident become triggers for anxiety. And that's a protective device. When we lived in more primitive times, we wanted to be aware of things that might mean there's a predator or an enemy around. And so whenever something negative happened, those sights and sounds imprint on our brain. So when we hear or see or feel them again, we become on alert. So it's protective. And so a person in a car accident, they encounter similar sounds, or they're on a freeway or a highway where the light hits them exactly the same, and it'll trigger that anxiety. In fact, I had one person tell me once, yeah, I was fine for a long time. I went through this car wash, and as soon as the brushes hit the windshield on the top of the roof, it sounded like the car accident, and they freaked out.
Wow.
So those triggers are very common. Same thing with people come out of combat situations. You know, a car backfires and suddenly they're covered up in the ditch alongside the road because it sounds like, you know, the live fire that they were in the combat situation. So in a similar way, the appearance of Santa Claus, Christmas trees, you know, Christmas music, on an unconscious level triggers, you know, there's going to be more stuff going on in a household. And so the person, that triggers the anxiety, even though they're now long, far away from that household, they're an adult, but still those triggers remain, and unless they get desensitized, they'll just keep firing up.
So triggers are a way that we are created. They're helpful so that
Supposed to be, yeah.
Yes, so that we stay out of danger. We remember that hot stove that we touched and so forth. However, they can really work against us if we're not processing them correctly, or if we haven't properly dealt with the negative that was associated with that trigger.
Exactly. And one of the problems is so much of our psychology is insight oriented. The idea is that once I understand what's going on, it all goes away. And with conditioned response patterns, that's not the case. The analogy I use is if I hook you up to a wire and every time I say purple, I shock you, pretty soon you're going to start jerking a little bit every time I say the word purple.
Right.
Now, I can take those electrodes off you. I can tell you that I'm never going to do that again, and you can believe me, but I guarantee the next time I say purple, you're going to jerk a little bit. Because, again, this is an unconscious response that's, you know, not even part of our conscious experience. Now, you can desensitize to that. If I keep saying purple and I don't shock you, and you say things to calm yourself, pretty soon you won't react to it anymore, except possibly when you're sick, hungry, tired, or stressed out. That's when those old triggers will occasionally fire again. And that's the other part of the piece of the puzzle, is that you need to understand that those triggers never go away completely. They're still down there. They become inactive. But occasionally, just the right set of triggers will activate an old response. And if you then tell yourself, oh my gosh, I'm back to square zero, you know, why is this happening to me? It'll just reinforce it. But if you tell yourself, well, wow, that's an old trigger. I'm glad I'm safe now. You know, I understand these things are going to happen once in a while, but I don't need to get alarmed about it. And I calm myself down. It'll quiet back down fairly quickly.
So if we're sick or tired or stressed out, it all can happen so much easier, which probably goes right along then with the holiday season. Is that we tend to be tired and stressed out for sure, because our schedule is different. Our schedule is more demanding.
Yeah, and we don't eat right. You know, oftentimes there's more alcohol. You know, more social events, all that stuff. So yeah, all of that plays havoc on the body.
You mentioned earlier clinical anxiety. Can you just describe that?
Well, there's several different types. The one I dealt with most was panic disorder, and that's where people are having panic attacks, and they seem to come out of the blue. They don't understand where they're coming from, and that's where, I mean, everybody's experienced some form of panic in their life. Mine was when I was almost got in a car accident, you know, and you're fishtailing and you just very, very barely miss the car in front of you, and you pull over and your heart's pounding and your foot's kind of shaking on the old accelerator. But then you know what's happened, so you calm down and you drive off and you're fine again. If that happens and there's no car accident, but your body just starts going crazy for no apparent reason, then that gets your attention. And again, what happens is people will start worrying about it. Well, what if I'm got some brain tumor? What if I'm sick? What if there's something going on wrong with me? What if it happens again? What if I can't control it next time? And they do all of this negative anticipation, and they also start kind of monitoring their body. And when they notice anything that resembles that response, they're like, oh my gosh, is that coming again? And of course, that trips the old fight or flight mechanism, and they start self-generating these things. And it's interesting because it appears to come out of nowhere, but whenever I talk with somebody, we can usually figure out where it came from. A typical scenario would be, I'd say, okay, so tell me about when your first panic attack occurred. I don't know, it just sort of happened. I was going to school, I was taking a full load, working a couple jobs, My fiance decided they didn't want to get married, and then my dad died. But I don't understand why. It's like
Sure.
you say, back up the truck a minute.
Sure.
I think I figured it out. So that initial panic attack is usually simply a stress reaction. But because the person is oftentimes perfectionistic, they need to keep doing everything right regardless of how tired they are. They don't do a lot of self-care, and they have very high expectations of themselves. Oftentimes they have a high need for approval. So they don't realize how stressed out they are until they start having panic attacks. And of course, then they're not connecting the two, and so then it takes on a life of its own. And so I worked a lot with that. Did some with obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, which we've already described, where there's been some kind of an unusual experience, and now that sets up some triggers that are now firing, and we have to quiet those down.
So for clinical anxiety or the panic, obviously one needs to talk to someone like you or talk to a counselor or therapist. Is medication always involved, or with something like that, or is there? Is that just kind of part of the remedy?
By time I would see people, probably half or more would be on medication of some sort. And what I would tell them is, fine, just take your medication if it's helping. Let's not mess with it. Let's take a look at some other things we can do, and then reassess in a month. And oftentimes at that point, they would decide to, okay, let's start paring back on the medication, because it's not the long-term answer, and it's kind of a short-term fix, but it doesn't really deal with the desensitization issues. Occasionally, I'd have somebody that got to take a long airplane flight. And I said, well, okay, get some medication, do it. You do the short-term fix because you don't want to go through the whole deal of trying to desensitize. So just take care of it that way. So I'm kind of, medication has its place. And of course, if a person is just so anxious and having so much problems that they're barely hanging on, medication to stabilize them so you can now start doing some of the cognitive behavioral other work that needs to be done is useful. And let me mention, too, because we use this word clinical anxiety. And when you talk about something like anxiety, depression, or whatever, everybody experiences these things, and it exists along a continuum. If it's interfering with your life in a serious way, we say it's clinical anxiety or clinical depression. But everybody has anxiety, everybody has depression. Some people have it more than others. A lot of it depends upon both your wiring, along with just your personality, your childhood experiences, that whole collection of things. Because I know with the people I dealt with panic disorder, as a group, their bodies are different. They're more sensitive individuals in general.
Wow.
In fact, I would often ask them in the intake, so how do you deal with how's caffeine affect you? And most of them, like myself, are very caffeine sensitive. If I have caffeine after about 3 o'clock, I'm going to be up to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So the way your body is reactive is the same way. Some people, you got to slap them upside the head to get them to notice something, right? And they're great in a warfare situation. They're great in a lot of, it's a useful thing in a lot of situations. And some people are just very reactive. And what I would tell people with panic disorder often is, it's a gift from God, because it's the quality about you that other people like the best. You notice when people, very empathetic. You notice when something's going on with people. You're a great listener. It's what your spouse, your kids, your friends really appreciate about you.
Wow.
The downside is it's like a house where the wiring's not quite up to code. You get too much stuff going in your life, and those circuit breakers trip, just like if you plug too many things in. So the long-term bottom line is you need to keep short accounts. When you start to notice symptoms, you need to go through the checklist. Okay, how's my relationships going? How's work going? How are my long-term goals going? Is there anything going on in life recently, that I need to address? Because anxiety, like all symptoms, is simply a message that you have some business to take care of. And so it's a matter of identifying, so what's that business, and what am I going to do about it? Unfortunately, people focus on the symptoms. They get all, carried away with that, and they ignore the fact that there's something they need to deal with. Because typically, somebody would come in after maybe 6 months, and their symptoms are starting to come up again. And so I say, okay, let's go through the checklist. And they would say things like, oh, I don't know, I was cleaning out that storage department that I shared with my ex-husband, again, an abusive relationship, right? And, I started having some symptoms. I don't understand, everything else was going normal. And, so you back up, you say, well, I think I see where the trigger is, right? So let's deal with some of those issues. And usually they do, and they're fine again. So Again, they're just messages. In fact, that's what emotions are. They tell us about needs and wants. Nothing more, nothing less. They tell us whether threats are existing, whether losses have occurred, whether something that we want we're going to get, and we get excited, the positive stuff. So, if you're getting anger, anxiety, sadness, first of all, where's that coming from? Where's the loss? Where's the threat? Is it real? Because a lot of times they're not, right?
Right, sure.
And in fact, my personal belief is that if we viewed the world exactly the way God views it, our emotions would work exactly the way they're intended to work. We would rejoice over the things that God rejoices over. We'd get sad and angry over the things that make Him sad and angry. But no, we don't. We see things through our own perspective, right? So I get angry because I've been slighted, or because I've lost something I think I deserve, or I get jealous because somebody else is getting something that I think I should have. And that's where the emotions go haywire for us.
Just quickly, Renaud, before I jump back into our main topic, you mentioned keeping short accounts.
Yes.
Does that mean dealing with something sooner than later, and
dealing with it as it comes up? Yeah, taking care of business. And if you've got an issue in your life, deal with it. One of the big ones, of course, is relationship stuff, right? A lot of times people have things going on in relationships, either boundaries that need to be set, some forgiveness that needs to be made. But instead of dealing with it, they just sort of shove it down to the side because I don't want to deal with it because it hurts my pride or it's threatening to me or whatever. And so then that generates all that anxiety and stuff that you feel.
Which, again, is part of Scripture, dealing with something before the sun goes down,
Sunsets,
before the 24-hour period.
Exactly.
Hey, again, if you're just listening in, we've got a lot more really good stuff to come, because I'm going to talk specifically with Renaud about holiday anxiety, and this is definitely that time of year, and so it's going to be able to help us. So we'll get to those specific questions, but again, thank you, Renaud, for being on. You can find out more about Renaud at whyemotions.com. That's whyemotions.com. You can search for him on YouTube and find lots of things there. It's Renaud Purifoy. It's Reneau, and then the last name is Peurifoy. Search that. You'll find, again, many things you'll find, again, on his website, Why Emotions. You can also find his books on Amazon.com. And some of them are Overcoming Anxiety. Anger, Taming the Beast is another one. Anxiety, Phobias, and Panic is one of his books. Also, Why Did God Give Us Emotions? And I think that we've kind of hit on that just a little bit. But to look at that further, you can find out more there. And Renaud has lots of other things that you can find on YouTube and his website as well. Again, I'm Pastor Tom. This is the 24 Today podcast. You can check me out at 24today.org. That's 24today.org, or my website, tomweitzel.com. So, Renaud, let's get to some of the specifics now. We've mentioned for the holidays, whether we are someone who is clinically depressed or clinically struggling with anxiety, or if it's just others that have anxiety like everyone has, during the holiday season, it just has the potential to really get much worse. Because with the holiday season, there are built-in triggers. And some of those are, as you mentioned, holiday music can take us right back to that time when we were 6 years old and we had some kind of episode with a family member, or the smells of the holiday. I'm sure, like the cooking, or going back to Mom's kitchen, when we don't normally spend time in Mom's kitchen, but here we are back again. So those are triggers that bring us right back to those moments. Is that right?
And for some people, that can be very positive feelings.
Sure.
So it works both ways. If you had a great time in Mom's kitchen, then you get warm, fuzzy feelings as those triggers get fired. And if you had terrible time in Mom's kitchen, then you're going to have the negative experiences. And maybe talk a little bit about more the normal type of anxiety that people experience. Probably some of the two of the big things would be just unrealistic expectations. People, again, going back to their childhood and thinking about the way it was back then and wanting to recreate that now, when now is different. You know, your situation and, you know, with your family, with your work, you know, just the reality of the way the world is now, is very different. Life is much faster, much more, convoluted than it used to be. And that seems to increase as time goes on. I know I'm sounding like I come from the old days, right?
Well, that's,
but it's true. And so, the other thing I think that increased it a lot is the lack of self-care. People just they put too much stuff on themselves. So a lot of times it's a matter of thinking about, you know, can I really afford, in terms of time and money and resource, to do a particular activity? Would it be good for me to do that activity? Do I really want to do that activity? I mean, those are three questions that sometimes we need to take a look at, especially when we reevaluate some of our traditions. You know, do I really need to have the best looking lights on the house in the neighborhood this year, given that my work situation, the fact I got some young kids or whatever, or something else, you know, a sick parent or something. Maybe I need to pare back on that. Do I really need to go to all these events that I've gone to in the past? Maybe I need to set up some new traditions. And part of that, I think, is taking time to think about, you know, what do I want out of the holidays? You know, what does it really mean to me? You know, where are my values? Because sometimes we get so caught up in just doing things because we've done them before, you know, and so I need to do them again. And so taking a look at that, I think, helps a lot with maybe making a more realistic use of your time during the holidays, so that you do take care of yourself.
sure.
And of course, just the practical things, you know, alcohol, rich foods, staying up late, you know, just being out and about more than you normally are. Those things, again, you need to, okay, maybe I need to have some rest the next day. If I'm going to have a big office party and I'm going to be out till late, maybe I need to not plan to decorate the house and go shopping and do everything the next day. Maybe I could do that on a different day. Or maybe I can do it before all that happens. You know, taking some time to just think about those types of things make a big difference.
One of the things that comes along with the holidays is that we are now with a maybe a large group of family members that we don't spend time around during the rest of the year. I mean, even if we live in the same town, we still don't see each other that often. But here we are now, and sometimes in a very small place for a whole day. And all of the things that have bugged us over the years that we may not deal with on a daily basis anymore, now they're right there. Yeah. Again, those sighs that people make, or the looks that people make, or the comments that people always make, now they're within just a few feet of us. So that, I'm sure, adds to it.
So we get to the whole issue of difficult family members, right? And again, if you come from a really loving, cooperative family, great, you know. But a lot of us don't have that with everybody. So sometimes it's useful to think about and do some planning beforehand if you're going to get together with them. If you have, for example, an alcoholic parent and you're going to go out of town to visit them, I always encourage people, don't stay with them. Stay in a motel so that you have a place to escape from. When you are around with them, sometimes like if they drink a lot in the evening, maybe plan to get together during the day when they're not going to be as volatile. Sometimes thinking about, okay, what are we going to do? Having an activity that can be the focus. If you just sit around in the living room talking, like you were saying, you're going to get those sighs and looks.
Sure.
But if you're out eating, if you're out going to a concert, or you're, you know, driving around looking at the lights or something, and you can make that the focus, then that helps to reduce a lot of that as well. And plus, people just behave better when they're in public, you know, than they do when they're at home. You know, you have that scrutiny of the people around you that tends to help them behave better. So some things like that really help when you're dealing with difficult family members. It also helps if you do set up some goals for yourself. For example, I have a relative that if I say anything of a political nature, they're going to go off and get crazy on me. So I just remind myself before I'm around them, don't talk politics. They're just, especially today, it's just way too volatile.
Sure.
So try to keep the conversation as something that's kind of neutral, right? So things of that nature. If you have somebody that does make negative comments, again, prepare yourself beforehand. Have some things to tell yourself. Well, okay, I don't need to pursue that. I can just change the subject. I know that person's, they're just mean that way, or they just say those things, and I don't have to take it personally. It's not me. And so you kind of set up in your mind what you're going to do, and then just have a little thing to tell yourself when that happens. And if push comes to shove, you just walk away. Plan a walk away strategy. Don't engage the person. So things like that, I think, it really helps with difficult family members. But I think out of all of those, not staying with them if they're out of town is probably one of the biggest ones. Having that escape route and knowing that I can get away helps you implement all of the other stuff, right? If I'm stuck in the house with them, I'm going to be stuck in the house with them for 3 days. Then that increases your anxiety, that increases your apprehension. Well, what if they say this or do that? But knowing that I'm just going to be with them for 4 or 5 hours and less if you need to, and then I can get away. And then while I'm away, maybe I'll go to the movie. Maybe I'll go see something that's in that town at that time that I enjoy. So those things help.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. Having a place to go would just be able to naturally, we could be able to escape something that's not going well or it's not helpful, instead of just having to sit there and be beat up or sit there and endure it. Maybe even having, if it's not a hotel, just some other thing that we kind of have scheduled, that we can say at the beginning of the gathering, we're going to have to leave at this time so that we can get to this, and just so again, it creates some type of boundary or limit there that it's a reason to shorten it.
And that works well when you have family that's in your same town. Right.
So it's okay to not to have to sit there all day. It's okay. I think that we actually need to determine around certain people, if we think back to our other experiences with them, what is the general time allotment that we tend to be able to be around them before we start to feel this way? I mean, what is it? Some people may be a half an hour. Some people may be 2 hour people. Some are 6 hour people. But maybe that's something that we need to think about. Again, my guest is Renaud Purifoy. I'm Pastor Tom, 24today.org or tomweitzel.com. You can find me. But Renaud's website is whyemotions.com. I encourage you to go there. It's whyemotions.com. You can find him on YouTube very easily. You can also search him out on Amazon, get a hold of his books, Overcoming Anxiety, books about anger, panic, lots of things, emotion in general, be able to help you to kind of figure out some things of why things are happening, and probably most of all, that you're not that unusual or abnormal, that what you're feeling, a lot of people feel, probably everybody feels, but if you could just get a handle on how to process that better, it would be a big help to you. So, Renaud, we're going to head down the home stretch here just for a few more minutes. So let me just give you a scenario. Let's say that you have a father who just has, for whatever reason, never felt like you've been able to have the money he thought you should have, or the success, or the job, and he always just sooner or later tends to push that button. I think that part of the reason why it's hard to be around family members and they push so many buttons is because they probably put that button there to begin with, and so it's very easy. But so let's say you're going to go and spend time with Dad for the holidays, and he always seems to bring up that job or whatever that basically he's saying you just haven't turned out the way I thought you would turn out. So how would you prepare yourself mentally? Would there be conversation things that you would steer away from, or what would you do, Renaud?
Well, there's a variety of things, but let me talk about a family member that I have who is always right.
Okay.
I mean, they read a lot. If you have an opinion, they're going to have a superior opinion, and they'll have 3 current magazine articles to back it up.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. So the way I broke this person of the habit was when we were around, I would just let them be right. In fact, this person would be restless, so we'd always be out in his car going to a store or something. We'd get to the store, I'd pick up something and as soon as I was interested in something, he'd find a reason for us to move on to another store, right? So I'd pick up something like maybe a candy bar, and he'd say, "Oh, that's terrible for you. It's got this and that." I say, "Oh my gosh, this will probably kill me by the time I'm 30. I think I'll buy 2 of them." And I just let him win, And at first it drove him crazy, but then after a while he backed off. He quit doing that. So sometimes, you just don't fight.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how powerful that can be, and then you just change the subject. You have to be comfortable inside of yourself as that button
to be able to do that
triggered.
Yeah.
And so that means you need to do a little work inside of yourself and understand that, it's not about me that he's doing that, and I don't have to buy into that. And sometimes that takes a little work on your own, to allow that other person to be who they are and to accept, this person, they're broken that way, and, it's sad. And I find when I work with people who have relatives, parents like that, at first they're angry. Why do they do this? Why do they do this? And sometimes they carry that anger for years. When healing is starting to take place is when that anger gets replaced with just a deep sadness, over the loss of what could have been. And that's so powerful once a person goes through that, because then they can just accept, "Oh, Dad, quit being that way." I know I'm a failure in your eyes, but I'm doing the best I can. And it's amazing how that'll shut them up.
Because they're really, they may not realize it, but they're looking for an argument. They're looking for you to defend yourself, and then for them to be able to come back and tell you why you're wrong. And so,
they may not even be looking for an argument. It may just be habit for them.
Sure,
they just may be a negative person. I joke sometimes. My mom is German, right? So I grew up with a lot of. That's why I don't dust. Because every time I would try to dust as a kid, I'd do the best I could. She'd walk in and she'd find the one thing I'd miss, right? It's a matter of just understanding some people, because of their own childhoods, because of their own wiring and stuff, they're just broken that way. And so and once you kind of reframe that in your own mind, as opposed to look at what they're doing to me, it's kind of giving them some grace, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to give you the grace to offend me, and I'm not going to be offended by it.
Wow.
To do these things.
That is so grown up to act that way. I mean, it's like you're being the adult in the room.
Yeah. Which, unfortunately, is so lacking today.
Yeah.
You look at what's going on in our culture.
Exactly, yeah.
We're becoming more immature all the time.
Yeah, and somehow, if somebody else acts immature, we think it gives us an excuse then to also act like a child, because they're acting like a child. Yeah. Therefore, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I like your thought of realizing that somebody is broken, that just continually pushes buttons and continually does rude things and mean things, that there's somehow something's not functioning right, or the wiring got disconnected. And instead of seeing it always as, I don't know, intentionally a slight against you, or they're saying it just to make you feel like a smaller person, or having to take it personally, just say, that's the sound of a broken person. That's the voice. That's the statement of somebody who at this point in their life is really responding like a child, because that's pretty much all they are at this point in their life. And so just like I wouldn't expect my 7-year-old grandson to to say things like an adult. I don't get so offended when he says things like a 7-year-old because I know he's a 7-year-old.
Yeah. Well, and we expect adults to act like adults,
yes,
right?
which is the hard thing.
And so many of them don't.
Yep.
They're acting like grown-up 2-year-olds, and that's why we use the phrase "you're acting like a 2-year-old," right? But it's those expectations. We expect everybody to treat me with kindness and respect in the way that I expect to be treated, and unfortunately, a lot of people in the world are broken. They're still at a very young age inside.
All right, Renaud, we're going to wrap it up here with just one final thought, and that is, isn't it a shame that especially the Christmas season, which is supposed to be, about God and what God has done for us, that it becomes so much the opposite, and it becomes a time, instead of causing us to feel grateful and just being able to be relieved in the fact that God is there, He loves us. Instead, it's all about us, and we're stressed out, and all these buttons are pushed, and we actually dread the holiday season. We dread Christmas. Isn't it a shame that that's really how it's become for so much of the world?
Well, I think that's why I started out saying your first step is to sit down and really think about, what do you want the holidays to be? Is it all about getting the perfect present, having the best lights, attending all the events? Or is it that I need to be with family? Is it about relationship? Is it about my relationship with Christ and with God?
Right.
And making some decisions there. And once you frame that, then the rest starts to become a lot easier.
Renaud, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I know I'm going to ask you at some other point to talk again, because there's just so much that we can learn together and gain from you. Again, check out Renaud's website at whyemotions.com. Check him out on YouTube. His books are on Amazon. So many books, so much helpful things from Renaud. Check me out, 24today.org or tomweitzel.com. If you have found this podcast or YouTube video helpful, please subscribe. Comment. Tell us why. If you have questions, put that down, because those are the things that help others to be able to find this. Subscribe to the channel, share it. All of that stuff, wherever you're at, is so helpful for you to be able to share and find this in the future. And like it. I forgot like. Please like. Click that thumb or whatever it is that you're looking at, but please like it. Renaud, it's been an honor to talk with you. Thank you again for being on the podcast, and I will talk to you another time. Remember, everyone, that there is still time left in this 24-hour period to live life today. Renaud, blessings. Talk to you again another time.